this. So I try to get it recorded, and all it does is pop up thing. Make an avatar. That could be a fun class project. So that's your homework. And so the first unit we're going to have is going to be, this is where we start right here, at this moment right here. The next test, we'll start covering here, the major test, the first unit test will be from this day, what day? September 1st, it'll be about 3 weeks, and it's going to be called Independence. So we go from colonial America through the Treaty of Paris of 1783. I know you've been waiting all year for the Treaty of Paris of 1783. I have good news for all of you. There are 2 treaties of Paris in this unit. They like to go to Paris for treaties. And so, label, now we're going to go right to your notes. So you're doing notes, so this will not be a topic notes. This is going to be independence. All of you know how to do notes. You have your own style to do notes. I do a lot of them in here. It's an incredibly important skill. And some things I do more notes than others. Some things I'm just going to say, you got to know it from your reading. That's just the way it is. And some things we do in class like that. But this is not on the right page. I got to go back just a little bit. But, so right here, just a couple of review things. I had to go through 4 cultures in pre-Columbian America. And one thing that's important to understand about pre-Columbian America, we have no idea how many people actually lived. The writing we do get, a lot of it was destroyed. It's hard to interpret. In this area here, well, a lot here, this kind of gray area, really advanced farming communities. They have pretty large town, walled cities, wooden walls, vast trade networks. There might have been as many as 300 languages here, in this area here, but no written records. And then when the Europeans arrived, the first Europeans arrived along this coast, you know, well, Columbus arrived here in 1492. They arrived along here for the next 100 years. Fishermen and explorers or slave hunters. They didn't last long. And so it's going to be over 100 years before Europeans would come and colonize. And in those 100 years, everything was finished. All that was there in 1492 was gone. Just gone. And so they just don't know. When I was your age in school, and I know what you're thinking, that was many, many years ago, back in the 1920s when I was in high school, we were told maybe 1 million people lived in the Americas when Columbus arrived. That always seemed low. And 1 million over this vast continent is tiny. And you know, by the time you start talking, maybe there might have been twice as many. We now believe between 100 and 150 million. And within 250 years, 90% were gone. So 150 to 200 million people. They're gone. Just gone. And so we have just remnants of their society. So here shows ruins, mounds. Cahokia was a city of maybe 500,000 people. Tenochtitlan right here when Cortez arrived, there might have been as many as 1 million people living in that valley. Okay, 7,000-foot valley along the river. And vast civilization. All were farmers, or almost all were farmers, except in areas like here, just because it didn't rain enough, they had to move. Makes sense, right? You gotta move. Even a lot of them would farm. So nomadic tribes like the Comanche, tribes like that, when they would move and along, they would plant along river bars, they would cultivate some crops, and then they would move and then try to come back when it's time to harvest and hunker down for the winter. But these were permanent settlements. When the English arrived, they were almost all gone. The cities were gone. The few that were left, totally dislocated. But when Columbus arrived, we have this, oh, this is humanized. But here they use slash and burn and control livestock that way. So it was all touched by humans. There's a myth, and I was told this, it was called the pristine myth, that when Europeans arrived, there's all this primordial forest and basically prime for the taking. Nobody abused it, and that's not true. That's not true at all. Farming communities, cultivated land, that kind of thing. One story about that. When the separatists arrived, you might call them pilgrims, when they arrived, and they started Plymouth, they didn't clear fields and move into or make this village. They moved into a remnants of a Wampanoag village on this river. Everybody had died of smallpox already. They just moved into their village. The crops, the land was already cleared, so they farmed that. That's how they survived. As the separatists called it, the God-given plague gave us this land. God gave them this. Then that was all forgotten. So let's get this real fast. We know about Spain. Columbus, 1492, was the first European arrived. And the big thing about Columbus, remember we said about the printing press? I told you about zero yesterday, didn't I? Didn't I? About zero. So, but the Spanish arrived, and when they got there, Columbus didn't find a lot of gold, but enough gold to make it incredibly valuable. And soon, what were those names? Oh, they created the colony, eventually be New Spain. And New Spain's going to stretch all over here to Tierra del Fuego, Argentina. A vast empire. So 1820, 1821, Spain, that was all Spanish colonies. Now they could conquer because disease. So Columbus arrived here, and these are all the other explorers. And then the French and the British started sending explorers all on this coast and spreading disease. Now, one thing about New Spain when they arrived, there wasn't as much gold as they thought. Okay, a lot of gold. They assumed it'd be like mountains of gold. They really sincerely believed, because they believed Columbus's lies. Columbus lied through his teeth about how much gold he found. They thought it was like mountains of gold. Like you stick a shovel in and it's all gold. No. The Spanish brought over a crop that grew really well in the Caribbean and in Brazil. That was like a crop. What's that? Potatoes actually came from the New World. The Spanish brought it over from the Old World. Good guess. Potatoes would be huge. Nasty potatoes. Good guess, but no, tobacco needs to be a little bit further north. That'd be another kind of like sugar, yeah, sugar. Sugar was like gold. They could grow sugar here. Promise, what do you need for sugar? To grow it, what do you need? Humans. Go through the back-breaking work of cultivating sugar. It's sugar plantations, up until the 20th century, chewed through human beings. They worked on the plantation. It was just hell on earth. I'm not kidding. Sugar plantations were some of the worst things you can imagine. And they chewed up people. Anybody volunteer to go work those? Volunteers. I'm looking for volunteers. And if you survive the first 6 months, you won't make 8. Yeah, you're lucky to make 6 months. It was that bad. Any volunteers? So what did it have to do? So they enslaved American Indians. A lot of these trips are, what were this? I actually asked in that packet of notes, what were the soldiers of fortune? Spanish soldiers of fortune, a lot of them were the second or third sons of noblemen who went to the New World to try to get rich. What do they call them? They believed in God, glory, and gold. Here's the conquistadors. So they're out there for conquest. But they needed money. The first money almost all of these explorers would get would be, here's what the first plantations were. They started going all on this coast on slave hunting expeditions to not only get conquest of the land, but to kidnap people and turn them into slaves. Or trade with one tribe for other members of the tribe. People might be thinking they're paying off a debt, and boom, they're enslaved. You ever heard of the Fountain of Youth in Ponce de Leon? When I was in elementary school, I remember we did a thing about that. It just still sticks in my head. It's one of those weird things I remember from 3rd grade. You ever remember your 3rd grade teacher? Some of you do? It's scary. It's amazing how it sticks in my head. Ponce de Leon was actually looking for gold. I'm looking for slaves. because what happened to all the people who lived here? They first enslaved. They died of disease. When Columbus kidnapped people to bring them back on the first voyage to show, hey, we can make money here enslaving people, 3/4 of them died before they ever got to speak. Disease just ravaged them. And so they went all through here. Like, for example, some of the most famous ones. Oh, but all the way up to here, etc. De Soto went through this area right here. Coronado here. Cortez was just supposed to explore, but he conquered the Aztecs. Why? Disease. Pizarro went here, conquered the Incas. Disease. Killed them all. And that's how New Spain was established. And those who survived, you asked about the encomienda. Those who survived, they were enslaved and went to big plantations. They're not quite slaves, but in essence, they're slaves. So that's New Spain. Really very quick version. There were a number of revolts. Revolts all over. Most famously, the Pueblo revolt right here. For a short time, they drove the Spanish out of Santa Fe. But for the most part, they failed. Slaves, this might shock you, don't like slavery. Did I just blow your mind? They didn't like it then, and my guess is you wouldn't like it now. And how do you convince someone to work if they're a slave? What is your tool? Huh? You can do a little bit of that, sure, especially if they have kids. What's that? Yeah. Terror. Torture. The constant threat of torture. Torture. That's how slavery functions. The constant threat of being branded, lose a toe, cut a toe off, your children taken away. Ear cut off, constant. That's how slavery functions. That's how it functions in America, that's how it functions everywhere. Because people won't do it unless that constant threat of terror. And starvation is a terror too. And so when there's a revolt, there's not a lot of mercy on both sides. Slave revolts are some of the most horrible things you can imagine. Not that slave revolts. So let's get to a couple of things today. So the Columbian Exchange, this actually is a relatively new term. No one really started using that term until the 1970s. But Columbian Exchange is an exchange of goods from the old world and new world. I asked you about this. What was the big crops that they got from the new world that went to the old world? Now this shows it to Europe. It's not just Europe. This is worldwide. What were some of the big crops that came from the old world? I'm sorry, the new world to the old world. What's that one? Tobacco's a big one. That wonderful addictive drug that they would decorate our capital with. Yeah, tobacco. And soon it's going to be grown in Turkey and what is now Turkey, what is now Egypt. Yeah. Potatoes might be the most important. Because what do you need to grow potatoes? A potato, dirt. Does anyone grow a potato? What do you do?
Cut the potato and just bury it.
Yeah. Wait till like a little root starts, or I call them an eye, or that, and just drop them in. All potatoes are clones of each other. They're also, therefore, clones aren't genetically strong. They're really susceptible to a blight. Everybody knows anything about, let's say, Irish history. You might know what I'm talking about. Yeah, it's coming. The famine was worldwide. There was revolutions all over the world in 1848. 2 million people died in the revolution caused by the potato famine in China in the 1850s. So this was a worldwide thing. But in the United States, it led to a big group of Irish immigrants coming. You can live on a potato. If you just have potato, you don't need anything else. It gives you enough nutrients. You might not be happy, but you can live on it. So the idea of famine went away. What other crop? Famines went down dramatically, except these genetic clones are very susceptible to blight. They still are. It's still an issue today. What other crops? Okay, corn technically is any plant with a stalk and seeds. So wheat is corn. Grain, any kind of grain is corn. I know what we call corn, but what is a more technical term? Maize. Corn, maize. But like corn, wheat is a corn. By the way, wheat, oats, millet, Why? That all came from the old world. Actually, it came from, like almost everything else, right? Our civilization was born. And that spread to Europe and spread to every place else. Squash. The one I always think of is tomatoes. So I have a nephew in Berlin, and I have a nephew near Rome. I'm very cosmopolitan. But my Italian nephew is now in 8th grade. Last time I talked to him, so, I was talking about this, and he said something about food, he saw eating. I said, tomatoes from the Americas. He got really mad. No, they're Italian, and he didn't care. Okay, I'm with him. I'm fine. So, and I have a nephew in Ohio. Yeah, I know, I saved the best for last. Moving on. What came from the old world? Sugar is one. Oh, almost right. Cocoa came from the New World. That would turn into a pretty big problem. Ironically, they didn't grow in Africa. It's one of those weird things. Bananas, all the wheats, grains, huh? Yeah, beans, actually, there are beans on both sides that went across.
Wait, so are there grains on both sides too?
No, most of the grain is on the old world. Beans there are beans in New World and Old World. The biggies. What? Yeah, livestock. All, the cattle, pigs, and also things like chickens. And where do they come from? Where else? Right there. The Fertile Crescent. Of course, it doesn't rain a lot there. They over-farmed it, over-irrigated. That's part of the reason why it's so much of a desert now. Over-farming things, over-irrigating, but moving on. What else came from the old world to the new world? All the disease. All the disease. There was nothing like the flu in the new world. Okay, the common cold that we have today is different than the common cold then. What they would have called the cold then actually is basically kind of common. What we call the cold today was actually the Russian flu from the 1890s. I know. You're all saying, when we get to the Russian flu, finally we got to it. The cold today is very much like COVID. It's a similar kind of thing. 1890s are a similar kind of thing. It's weird how things kind of circle around. But they had cold, smallpox, measles, mumps, all those diseases were in the old world. Why were they in the old world and none were in the new world? I told you.
Those diseases were in those small communities.
That's actually good if they were spread out, but in the
They had like huge cities, and it just kept
there were huge cities here. They were very connected by trade. It was much. Some of the cities were 20, 30, 40,000 people. So you can see like on the plains, but not so much on the East Coast or let's say the Aztec. So.
Talk about sanitation.
Both were relatively clean. Yes, people bathed in them. That's not the issue. They're all tied together anyways. And the diseases that existed before the animals. Animals. There were no domesticated animals in the old world. Except for dogs, llamas, guinea pigs, and a certain couple of different types of ducks. So they didn't have those diseases. Most of the diseases come from livestock. Smallpox comes from cows. It's called cowpox. The first immunization, inoculation is slightly different than vaccination. It's like vaccination is a little more complex. But they would find these pock marks on cows with cowpox, and they would literally, I know it's kind of gross, but lunch is coming. They would cut it open and suck up the blood from there and literally just inject it into people in the 1800s. That was the first inoculation. George Washington's army of Valley Forge, smallpox was ravaging, so they all got it. I can't even imagine what a needle would have looked like in 1778. It was probably a big thing. I think they just cut open and just kind of drained it in. They all had to get inoculated in Washington's army. But that's where it comes from. It's animals. They didn't have it. When Columbus arrived, he commented on how just strong, strikingly healthy the American Indians were. He also said they made great slaves. And that's what killed them. They had no immunities built up because they had diseases. So they were very susceptible. And so smallpox destroyed the Aztecs. It was the flu, one of the many different parts of the flu, but it was a flu that destroyed all the tribes. Just destroyed them. And as soon as they got into contact, they were gone. When De Soto went through here, he found these villages and hundreds of thousands of people. He fought them all the time because the Spanish fought everywhere. But De Soto also brought his food along with him. And this is 1500. So they didn't quite have refrigeration. So how did you bring fresh meat? You had the pigs and cows go along with you. One ran away, the cows spread flu, and when the French came, this was 1530, when the French came down 100 years later, nobody. Few people had listened, individual people, but the cows were gone, they were farming, forest was overtaking. How long would it take a forest to overtake an area? Okay, don't think Montana where it doesn't rain. Think on the east where it rains. How long? 2 generations, as far as. And they sincerely believed no one lived here. No one had ever lived here. Let me rephrase that. They wanted to believe. All right, so that's the Colonial exchange. And that would trigger globalization. Once the Spanish arrived and talk about the gold, this is going to trigger trade all over. Even though there wasn't near as much gold as they thought, they would double the amount of gold and silver in circulation in Europe in 50 years. Spain became rich beyond comprehension. In fact, the Spanish Empire is going to be, it's called the Habsburg Empire. It's going to be Spain, much of what is now Italy, this huge area here, which is Germany, Austria, Poland, that was all Spain at that time. And they went to war with everybody and blew their fortune, and Spain was indebted 200 years of a joke of a kingdom 300 years later. So you can be the richest country in the world, and if you blow it all on things that won't invest in your country, lose it all. That's what we call a cautionary tale. But all this gold went here. What happened to prices across Europe? Also, the Spanish have more money than anybody. Yeah. And prices go up. What happens to the value of money if prices go up? What do we call that? The words might be up there. Inflation. When the value of money goes down and prices go up. So obviously, if the value of money goes up, what happens to prices? Value of money goes up, prices drop. That's deflation. And these are 2 words you have to know. They dictate so much of history, it's hard to even put in terms. Inflation and deflation decide almost everything. Prices exploded in Europe, and what did that encourage? All these other European countries, like overnight, the money they thought they had, what was the value of the money they thought they had? Countries, individuals, what happened? Dropped like a rock. And now they need more money. Where are you going to get money? That's why they started exploring here. And 100 years later, you have the French and the British starting colonies. They started trading more. Portugal went on just a bloody conquest of just riding into ports here and shelling and killing without warning to take over and get as much gold as possible. And they would blow it all too. Everywhere. The inflation because of that would trigger more exploration. Worldwide. Why is there a United States? Deflation. Why is there a constitution? Deflation in some areas, inflation in other areas. The money supply decides everything. The value of money. When there's massive deflation, that's when you have the Great Depression. We have a little bit of inflation now. Not much, not that much in historical terms, but we haven't had inflation so recently, so it's very new to most people. I'll come back to this. But whoever controls the money supply controls the country. But let me ask one simple thing. If the value of money is going down, inflation, who does that help? People with money or without money? Or another way to look at it, debtors, people who owe a lot of money, or the people who loan the money because they have it, creditors. Who's helped by inflation? Creditors or debtors? Debtors. If you borrow money today and pay it back tomorrow, and there's inflation, you pay back with money of what? What's that? Who's that? Oh, that's your value. You see why if you are in debt, you like inflation. You don't have much money, inflation's okay. You have money. What happens? If you have money just sitting there, and there's deflation, what happens? You don't have to do anything. The value of money goes up. If you're a bank and you loan money today and there's deflation, you get money that's what? You always know who runs the country. The wealthier, the people in charge. The wealthy control it. Go through everything they can have deflation. That's how they make money. It decides everything. So, back to this. And so, that's what it's going to look like eventually. The French being a conquest of this. England, which was always broke, they were really hurt by inflation. England didn't have anything. But that would encourage a lot of creativity and copy the Dutch. They would colonize here, French, the British would go up here, British got a couple spots here. So, Virginia was our first colony, 1607, Jamestown. It was a joint stock company, the London Company. The King James, the monarch of England, the monarchy was so broke, they couldn't do it on their own. And so they basically told these relatively wealthy individuals, you get enough investors, we'll give you all this land. You know, you got to fly the English flag, but it's yours. You own it. You got to pay taxes. Then eventually they would take it over and make it a royal colony. The biggest colony by population and money that Britain would have would be India. And it would be owned by a private company until the 1850s. A private company owned it called the East India Company. They cleaned up. They're the ones who sold all the opium to China. There was an attempted colony. You know the name of the first attempted British colony? Roanoke. I know. However you pronounce it, we got the word right here, Roanoke. Terrible place to make a colony. They did it in 1587. They were right in the middle of a war with Spain. You might have heard of the Spanish Armada. And so when they went back out to their invasion attempt failed, they went back and everybody was gone. So Roanoke disappeared. Probably what happened is the Spanish were down here in St. Augustine. They probably sailed up and killed. And those who survived ran away and joined the tribes. That's the problem. American Indian tribes welcomed, in fact, recruited colonists to join the tribes, especially women. And a lot of English women joined the tribes. They have no rights for women to tribes. A lot. It was actually a big problem in all of this. All right, so Jamestown was the second, 1607. This company, they were given all this land. Okay, they gave them the land claim. No, they didn't bother to ask the people who lived there. They just said, this is now Virginia. Oh, what's Virginia named after? Yeah, Queen Elizabeth, who part of her reputation was that she was unmarried, she was a virgin. So, she had already done it. But King James, they named it right here, named after him, Jamestown, right here. On this little peninsula they call it the James River. They chose Virginia because it's far away from Spain. They didn't want the Spanish coming up there and killing them. Even though Spain had been defeated, Spain was still in this gradual decline, but it's still powerful. Protected from storms. So that's why they went there. They didn't know what they'd get. All they assumed it was gold. And if you invest in a company, why do you invest in a company? What do you want? Money. And so they took this money with a promise, we're going to find mountains of gold. The people who made up the colonies were called dandies. Dandies were the second, third, fourth sons of noblemen. Okay, let's say there's a nobleman, a knight, a duke, whatever it might be. They have land. The first son inherits it, in fact. Some of you might have heard of the term primogeniture. The first son inherits the land. I should have. You ever heard of a dowry before? If you didn't have a son, that's how you convinced. Now we're talking England. That's how you convinced maybe the second or third son of a nobleman to marry into your family, so you now you have a son. You give part of the fortune to that second or third son, so they marry your daughter, and therefore the land will stay and let they have a son. That's what a dowry is. To bribe noblemen. But second, third son, they don't get anything. And so they were going to go become rich. They're going to get their piece of land, and this is what they thought they would get. What they thought was, they'd go there and there'd be mountains of gold. And then they can start a plantation, become English country gentlemen. Have you ever been to the South and seen one of the plantation homes? They're specifically designed to look like English country estates. That's what they wanted to be. If I couldn't do it in England, I'll do it in Virginia. So, these dandies. Now, what skills do you suppose these second or third or fourth sons of noblemen have? Drinking wine, eating. Yeah, but if they do have education, it's probably classical education so they can speak Greek, which is really valuable in the New World. They had very few people who could farm. They need soldiers, they need carpenters, they need people with these skills they didn't have. But they just assumed it's going to be mountains of gold and they're rich. And so in 1607, when the first 3 ships arrived to Jamestown, 1607, they sailed up the James Estuary. Okay, excuse me, vocabulary term, what's an estuary? We don't have them in Montana. You know what an estuary is? Anyone know? Okay, it's a river that's affected by the tides. So it goes up and down with the tide. Because it's close enough to the ocean, and estuary have up and down tides, so it goes up and down. So some of you might have heard about, paying attention to the horrible hurricane here, and then up this coast. It's estuaries that really flood. The high tide and all that. The water's a little brackish too, which means it's a little salty because it's connected to the ocean. So it's maybe not the best place to go. Where they set up Jamestown, the water's still salty because it's right next to the ocean. Well, they sailed up. Think about a nice sunny August day. They had to go in the summer, so winter's coming. It's a bad time to go. They're sailing up. They assume it's going to be mountains of gold. They'll get rich and become country gentlemen, or buy their own estates back in England. We'll show you. Up the James. It's low tide on a sunny day in August. Low tide. So it leaves sandy beaches on both sides of this broad river that's a mile wide. Sandy beaches. Sunny day. What is it? What does it look like? It's all gold. They anchored their 3 ships, they jumped out, they had barrels of supplies that they all dumped out into the sand to rot, and they got shovels and shoveled in the sand into the barrels to send home their fortunes. No, they didn't build homes. They didn't build shelters, they built nothing. They sent them back. I always wonder what those guys back in Southampton or wherever, when those 3 ships arrived, you sent us barrels of sand? Thanks for the sand! And what happened that winter? They called it the first starving time. Half died. Next summer, more people came, more dandies. And they came to half-starved people sitting in hovels, literally dying. And what's the first thing those people did, the new people? The same thing. They shoveled sand into barrels and sent it back. They did that twice. By 1610, less than 2/3 of the people had survived. In fact, when the supply ships arrived in 1610, they were coming across people who were gnawing crazily on human bones because they turned to cannibalism. It's swampy there. They couldn't find food. The Powhatans and the neighboring tribes looked at them like they were a bunch of idiots, invaders. They would have drove them to the sea if they weren't ravaged by disease that ran through them 5 years earlier. But I love this. Here's a picture from a book in 1670 talking about the arrival of the Englishmen, the new printing press. And here's the Chesapeake, there's the James. North is here. We all look at maps in the northern hemisphere, and they put north on top. That was not done yet. So they've got those weird maps. Oh, I should add, you see it? First up, there's no real dictionaries yet, and that's an S. In the old printing press, the S's will look like that. So we have the English. I can't even say it. So eventually, the neighboring Powhatan tribes helped them. They made a deal. You help us with our enemies, we'll give you some food. They're starving. They didn't have a clue what they're doing. Here's actually a picture of one of the Virginians, that's what they call the settlers, meeting with a few of the tribal members. And so they basically helped them. And that's where we get to John Smith, who actually was in Roanoke. He was a fighter, got sold in fortune. He was eventually open to Pilgrims. John Smith allied with the Powhatans, organized them. Oh, that's what she wasn't supposed to be there. This is the fort they have there. John Smith, they give him a lot of credit, kind of organized them. You guys are going to have to work. You're going to have to farm. We're going to have to survive. But they also noticed the Powhatans at all these meetings were either chewing on or sometimes smoking on something. What? Tobacco, addictive drugs. And that's what they did. The Powhatans and the other tribes in that area, the Mingos and the other tribes, were devastated by disease. They had cleared their land that was partially cleared. When the tribes, they planted corn, beans, squash, tobacco, all in the same land. They planted it all together, which is actually the best way to plant. But you don't get as high yields, a lot harder to pick. The English burned as much of that down and just planted all tobacco and saved. Who was the planter who's given the credit for the first one? Others were doing it, but shipping it back to England in 1613. Tobacco. 1612, we started planting. 1613, the first tobacco, and it hit like wildfire. Smoking was big, but what they really liked to do was grind it up into a fine powder and snort it up their nose. It gave an immediate high, and it would also eat away the septum here. So your nose would begin to rot away. I mentioned diseases, and I told you about the diseases that would come from the old world to the new world. There was one disease that also rotted their nose that came from the new world to you. Syphilis. And so all these tobacco smokers, they didn't know if they had syphilis, which is a sexually transmitted disease, or were smoking tobacco. Henry VIII got syphilis. So syphilis spread through wildfire. It's a little bit of revenge, I guess, from the old So the new world. All right, and so tobacco, you don't need to know the exact numbers. The point is, just all of a sudden bushels of tobacco. And it became the rate machine. Any volunteers to pick tobacco? It's better than sugar. It's like getting kicked twice in one shin or only once in the other shin. Yes. What's your homework?
Chapter 2, 1, 2.
Huh?
Then,
Yeah. Now, I know it's going to be hard. You're going to be away from me for 3 full days. I feel your pain. You're going to be like 5 months.
4 days.
Not 3 whole days.
Yeah.
You're going to be
I go 4 days and then I come back and then leave again.
Where's the golf at this time?
Tuesdays in Great Falls and Thursdays in Bozeman.
That's a problem. The golf courses don't want to give up the courses on the weekends.
Yeah.
So you guys got to do it on weekdays. And you have 1 month to do everything.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's always at the beginning of school when you're learning everything.
Well, they used to. It was always in spring. Yeah.
Or then track
Track
tennis.
and Spanish storm.
Oh, that's
So they thought fall would be a little better.
yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
I think it does work out better.
Because he's been so fast.
Where are you? Football, when you got back at 3 a.m.? Are you rested, fit, ready to roll? So I just collected that map. I did it kind of a little, I reviewed some of the things I did in the form of a quiz. And so, as long as you just give me the map, we'll just start today. Pick wherever you want to sit. I'm gonna let people pick their seats today. Sound good?
I love it so much.
I got it.
Oh, yeah, I know. Oh.
So we actually do a class here.
You're good. Not talking about it?
I changed.
Oh, yesterday I couldn't.
Maybe we'll have remind me, okay? The big thing about seating charts is just so I can change it.
The outline for the notes
If you just go on Teams, go to the summer stuff.
I might, because was it its own team? For
No.
summer assignments?
Oh, I got it. Just give me a sec. I was recording class. This is, what we've said has all been recorded.
Oh, no, that